2024 predictions for the American League Central. Guardians, Tigers, Twins, Royals, White Sox. Where do they go? How do they end up? Who finishes where? What are the storylines? Who are the players to watch? What are the projected win totals? What are the World Series odds? Where do I think they're going to finish? I've got it all here. I've got it all covered. 2024 AL Central. Recap, coverage, rankings, standings. It's here. It's time. And let's dive into it. Fifth place team in the American League Central Division is going to be the Chicago White Sox. My goodness, is this roster bad? I looked at the White Sox roster when I started this projection process and going over where I think everyone's going to finish in the standing. I could not believe how bad the White Sox roster is, especially since 3 years ago, they won, I think it was 2 years ago, if you want to say it like that, not 2023 and not 2022, but 2021, these guys won the AL Central, 95 wins. Yasmani Grandal and Jose Abreu and Luis Robert and Eloy and all these dudes. And I went through that roster. Realistically, the only three guys that are worth anything are Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, and Dylan Cease. I wouldn't be shocked if all three of those guys were off the roster by the season's end, because it appears the White Sox are full-blown tank mode. Full-blown nosedive to get as far down, as close to rock bottom as possible without actually touching it. Last year, they won 61 games. Their projected win total this year is a generous 63.5. Their World Series odds are plus 25,000. So you could bet $100 on the White Sox to win it all. And if they do, you win 25 grand. That's how confident Vegas is when they set that line, that you can put whatever you want on them, because my God, are they not going to win the World Series? This team is not good in every single aspect of the roster construction. They're not any better than they were last year. But the good news is, for the White Sox fans, if there is any at all, is shortstop prospect Colton Montgomery. As one of my players to watch, I like Colton Montgomery. I like these guys, these young prospects, but it's a lot harder when it's a team like the White Sox where it doesn't really appear to be like there's a plan. It's hard to root for and get fully invested in a prospect when it appears he's going to head into a situation that's just a ship with no course, right? It's a White Sox team that is still years and years and years away from being competitive. And because of that, it's unfortunate for Colson Montgomery, because you don't know where he's going to make an impact, if he's going to make an impact. And what's the motivation to come up and do well and play well if the team around you is just complete hot garbage? I mean, realistically, Montgomery's probably good enough to be in their top 9 and as far as lineup goes right now. It's just the whole prospect, logistics, semantics, all that prospect stuff that you have to deal with. But they do have a good prospect in Montgomery. And the other player to watch that's not as... It's an obvious pick in Luis Robert. The reason I put him, and I included in my page here about the White Sox, if you're seeing video footage of it. But for those of you listening on the podcast, Luis Robert is listed as a player to watch with parentheses trade next to his name. He's got 2 years of control, I think this year and next year. It's a relatively affordable contract. He's one of those guys who signed, that team-friendly early extension type deal, like a 5-year extension for $60 million, some stuff like that, where, it's big money for him at the time. The organization, yes, is taking a little bit of a risk because they don't know if whatever will happen, right? They're not fortune tellers. Robert wants his money now, but as it turns out, based on how good Luis Robert is, he's probably worth more than that. So regardless, I wouldn't be shocked if Luis Robert is dealt at the deadline, especially if he's playing well. It's going to be a big time ask price. And that's exactly what the White Sox want to get out of guys that they have on their roster right now. Build up the farm system, start to turn this thing back in the right direction. But in the meantime, you got Colson Montgomery and you got Luis Robert, who is for certain going to be traded this year. I would bet a lot on that. If there's a market somewhere, I just can't see them holding on to him much longer, because his value's high. He's at a cheap and affordable contract for other teams to acquire. So they're going to be more than willing to give up a bunch of, prospect capital for a guy like Luis Robert. 61 and 101 last year. Win total projected at 63.5. This year, I've got them at 62 and 100 losses. 5th place in the American League Central. Not much to say there. It's going to be an ugly year in Chicago for the White Sox fans. Sucks to say, but hopefully they can turn it around soon. In 4th place in the American League Central is the Kansas City Royals. Now, I like the Royals. I like a lot of the things they have going. I like Bobby Witt. I think that they're starting to trend in the right direction. in terms of how they're building this thing up. They had their peak back when they won the World Series in 15. Has been kind of a tough sledding for that team ever since. Last year, 56 and a 106 record is tough to swallow. I don't think anybody in Kansas City was disappointed with that, only because that was pretty much the expectation. Now, going into this year, win totals jumped up to 73.5. I'm not really sure where that's coming from. Maybe there's more expectation out of these guys with a little bit more experience under their belt, but a jump from 56 wins to the Vegas line of 73.5 is a pretty big number. And I'm not sure about it. World Series odds are plus 15,000. Bet 100, win 15 grand if the Royals win the World Series this year. And 2 players to watch. Number 1, Cole Ragans. All right, listen to me. Cole Ragans is a left-handed pitcher, double TJ guy, and his arm, when it's on, and if he can stay healthy, please God, knock on wood, let this man stay healthy. If Cole Ragans goes the distance this year and he can stay on the mound, and let's just say he doesn't even have to make 35 starts. Let's just say 25 to 27 starts for Cole Ragans this year. I'm telling you guys, he's going to be a top 5 Cy Young guy. He is that guy. He's disgusting. Every single pitch he throws has ridiculous metrics behind it. And again, left-handed starting pitcher, mid to upper 90s, sitting. Really uncomfortable at bat for anybody. Just got to stay healthy. Got to stay on the field. Got to avoid those arm complications. And if you do, man, oh man, they have a gem in this kid, Cole Ragans. Another kid to watch out for, player to watch. Not as important for Kansas City because their prospect capital is actually not very high, but they've got a young high school catcher they drafted, Blake Mitchell. He's expected to be in the bigs in a couple of years, but it's a guy to keep your eye on because when you're a first round pick like he was, catcher, left-handed bat, you just expect a lot out of those guys. High school kid, needs a little bit of time to develop, but it's somebody that the Royals fans and even non-Royals fans, let's say in 3 years, are like, oh, Blake Mitchell. I remember that name because Ryan is a genius and he told me to watch out for him. And here I am telling you to watch out for Blake Mitchell. So keep your eye out for him. He's a young catcher prospect. I think he's literally 19 or 20. Got some time, but he'll be up in a couple of years. And who knows, right? Chaos could strike the organization. They lose 4 catchers and you see Blake Mitchell in September. Who knows? Probably not, but who knows? 56 and 106 last year for the Royals. 73.5 for their win total this season. I've got them coming in at 70 and 92. Good for 4th in the American League Central. It's nothing personal. Nobody's surprised by this. Royals kind of starting to trend up a little bit, but ultimately going to be a lot of the same from last year. Decent young core, starting to build it up a little bit. Salvi coming to the back end of his career. A lot of unproven guys. Who knows how it'll actually end up, but I think 70 and 92, pretty fair. May even be a little bit generous for the Royals in 2024. 3rd place in the American League Central Division. 3rd place team, Cleveland Guardians. Cleveland Guardians. Interesting ball club here. Terry Francona, retired. Stephen Vogt, hired. Lots to prove. Not a ton of star power in terms of offensive production. Obviously, you've got Jose Ramirez. But other than that, it's kind of been the story for the Guardians the last few years. Contact-based team, low strikeout numbers on offense, young, controllable pitching, good enough back end, and try to win as many games as you can. Maybe play a little bit above the expectation. Last year, 76 and 86, kind of where most people expected them to be. This year, win total 78.5. World Series odds plus 7,500. Young, unproven manager. I think there's going to be a little bit more struggles that this team may not know how to deal with a new manager and Stephen Vogt. I think Stephen Vogt's a good manager. I just don't know exactly, how he'll be able to lead guys if things start to get a little bit tough. I think he'll be fine. They have a couple players to watch. Good prospect capital. Kyle Manzardo is a really good first base prospect for them. He should be up this year at some point. Guys go down with injury, availability. They want a little bit more offensive production. Don't be shocked to see Kyle Manzardo and playing first base for the Guardians this year. And the other guy is Brian, I think it's Rocchio, but it could be Rocchio or Rocchio. And Brian is Bryan. Middle infield prospect, great athlete. Again, exact prototypical Cleveland Guardians based on what they've got right now. Low strikeout guy, contact based, athletic, not the biggest. May see him up at some point as well, but those are the 2 guys to watch out for the Guardians in 2024. 76 wins last year, 78.5 for the win total this season. I've got them right in the middle of those 2 at 77 and 85. 3rd place in the AL Central. Not going to get into the postseason with that record. Guardians are going to be a middle of the pack team. You need a bunch of middle of the pack teams throughout the season to fill out the middle of the pack. Guardians are going to be one of those teams. We'll see what happens. They may outplay that. They may finish a little under that. I think 77 and 85 seems about right for that team going into this season. Second place in the American League Central, the Detroit Tigers. What? Detroit Tigers. It's about time, man. It's about time the Tigers start to get on the map a little bit. I mean, where have the Tigers been from a relevancy perspective since the departures of Scherzer, Verlander, Porcello, Prince Fielder, Ian Kinsler? Like, they were dogs. And they get to the World Series in 2012, 14, 12, 2012 World Series, deep run, and crickets after that. Miguel Cabrera retired. Sort of this new era, right, of Tigers baseball. You got young, controllable guys, Torkelson, Riley Green, Casey Mize. They're starting to build momentum, right? They're starting to build that foundation that's necessary for some dependable guys. They tried to kind of sign that veteran leadership guy with Javi Baez. He may be leading in the locker room, but his production hasn't really been there. Regardless, they're trying to start building momentum, build momentum in the right direction. And I think they're doing it. 78 and 84 last year. That's not bad. 79.5 for the win total this year. Plus 6,000 World Series odds, 60 to 1. Right? Yeah, 60 to 1. They got a couple of guys to keep an eye on. Okay. Prospect Colt Keith, third base, second base guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes up this year, probably a later in the season type of call up, but he's a high prospect for them, the guy that they really like. And he's going to be an impact guy for the Tigers if they're going to start trending in the right direction. Another guy to keep an eye out for, and it's between the two guys in the back end of the bullpen for the Tigers, but this guy specifically last year, Jason Foley, back end bullpen pitcher, pitched kind of the expected numbers a little bit, right? Got kind of lucky with balls in play. Expected batting average was lower than actual batting average against, that kind of stuff. However, he was nasty. And if it comes down to the trade deadline and there's a team looking for a reliable back end arm to come in and throw up zeros in the 7th, 8th, or even 9th for a playoff contending team, Jason Foley is your guy. He is going to be one of the hot targets on the trade deadline if he can keep up what he sustained last year. And the Tigers would be more than happy to part ways with him. Not because they don't like him, not because, of course, he wouldn't be a good player for them, but because those rentals typically end up costing more than a offseason or random trade where it's a team that's a little bit more desperate, willing to give up a little bit more. And that's what the Tigers want to do right now, is continue to load up prospects, load up the farm system, load up reliable depth, and part ways with one bullpen arm. One. That being said, 78 and 84. Good record for them last year. Projected win total for them this year is about a win better. I have them at 79 and 83. It's good enough for second place, right at the Vegas win total. I think they'll be similar to last year. Young, hungry, a couple of big time moments, maybe some dramatic, walk-off wins with Kerry Carpenter and all those guys that slugged it like crazy last year for them. Ultimately, it's not going to be enough, and this division's not great. Their starting pitching is a little bit up in the air, and we'll see what happens. 79 and 83 is right on for where the Tigers will finish in 2024. And in first place, to nobody's surprise, in the American League Central, I've got the Minnesota Twins. 87 and 75, good record for them last year, good enough to win the division. 87.5 is their projected win total this year. So, Vegas doesn't have them getting much better than they were last year. World Series odds are plus 2,000, 20 to 1. I think these guys will win the division again. I got them in first place. That doesn't mean they're going to make some crazy deep run. I do think the postseason experience that they dealt with last year is certainly going to help the young guys going into this postseason if they end up winning the division. There's a couple of people to watch out for, and it's typically two players that I have listed off. But in the case of the Twins, the first guy I have is Edward Julian. Okay. Edward Julian, second baseman for them. I know they have a bunch of other options. They've got a ton of infield guys. They've, forget the kid's name, but they drafted a kid out of Vanderbilt, something Austin. I can't remember. Regardless, he's a second baseman, young, controllable prospect with high upside. Correa, Donovan Solano, like they have options. They went with a bunch of options, and Edward Julian, I think, may have bounced on and off the injured list a little bit last year too. Regardless, wasn't like the absolute guy. I think he got sent down last year, and it was a little bit surprising because he came up, played pretty well, and then got sent down. I hope to God that they put him at second base and let him hit at the top of the order and play every single day. I love his left-handed bat. I think he has like all-star caliber potential and bat control. His exit velo, his barrel percentage, monster in those categories based on his size and his position of second base. Edward Julian could very easily be representing the Twins in the All-Star game in July. So keep an eye out for him. The second person to watch I have listed is multiple people, and it's the Twins bullpen. Twins bullpen is loaded. They added a bunch of dudes. Not to mention the back end is just anchored down by Joan Duran, who throws 1 trillion miles an hour. Those sinkers and splitters at 99 miles an hour. He's basically unhittable. And you combine that with Pablo Lopez, with Sonny Gray, with Joe Ryan. I like what the Twins have to offer. They may struggle a little bit offensively, kind of the story similar to last year, led by a guy like Carlos Correa, realistically finding themselves first place in the American League Central Division. 87 and 75 last year. Vegas win total has them in 87. I've got them in 88. Right around that same record. I think they're a game or two better based on the additions they've made in the bullpen, but they're 88 and 74, which is good enough for first place in the AL Central. And to recap the AL Central final standings, I've got White Sox in fifth, 62 and 100. Royals in fourth, 70 and 92. Guardians in third, 77 and 85. Tigers in second at 79 and 83. And the Twins winning the AL Central with a record of 88 and 74. White Sox fifth, Royals fourth, Guardians third, Tigers second, Twins first. That's my standings for the American League Central. Not very far off from where it's been in years past. This division is not good. Wanted to make sure I got that in there. This division is not a good collection of teams. It hasn't been a good division for a long time. I'm hoping with the emergence of some of these Tigers' younger prospects, they can start competing for the division title. I'm hoping the Royals can make some acquisitions, can call some guys up. They can start to becoming a little bit more relevant again. The other two teams, the Guardians are always going to be middle of the pack team, could potentially start to turn things around. They're just low payroll. Kind of the story with a lot of this division. Guardians, Royals, White Sox, cutting payroll, low payroll, some impact guys, but ultimately, man, just not exactly what you would expect out of 5-team division. Twins, here it is. Take it or leave it. It's pretty much your division to have unless you guys absolutely choke it away. I don't expect them to, and I'm seeing the Twins winning the AL Central in 2024.